What if I told you that some of the most brilliant scientific discoveries in history weren't made in modern labs or universities, but thousands of years ago by civilizations with nothing but curiosity and keen observation? Picture this: long before microscopes, telescopes, or even the formal scientific method existed, ancient cultures were unlocking secrets of the universe with nothing more than their senses, ingenuity, and a relentless drive to understand the world around them. From the Babylonians mapping the stars with astonishing precision to the Egyptians preserving bodies so perfectly we can still study them today, these early innovators didn't just stumble upon knowledge. They crafted methods so advanced they still leave scientists in awe. Think about the last time you looked up at the night sky trying to spot a constellation or a passing comet. Now imagine doing that without any of the tools we take for granted. No apps, no telescopes, just your eyes and a clay tablet to record what you saw. That's exactly what Babylonian astronomers did over 3,000 years ago, tracking planetary movements so accurately their calculations still hold up today. Or consider the ancient Egyptians who turned mummification into a science so precise we're still uncovering its secrets millennia later. These weren't just random acts of trial and error. They were systematic, repeatable processes, early scientific methods in every sense of the word, even if they weren't called that at the time. This video is a journey back to those moments of genius where human curiosity first began to shape the world as we know it. We'll explore 31 astonishing methods used by civilizations across the globe, techniques so clever, so ahead of their time, they laid the groundwork for everything from modern medicine to astronomy. And here's the most thrilling part: many of these discoveries were lost to history for centuries, only to be rediscovered and confirmed by modern science. So whether you're a history buff, a science enthusiast, or just someone who loves a good story of human ingenuity, you're about to witness the hidden side of scientific progress, one that proves our ancestors were far more than just primitive cultures. They were pioneers, innovators, and in their own way, the first true scientists. Long before the invention of telescopes or even the concept of a scientific journal, Babylonian astronomers were quietly revolutionizing our understanding of the cosmos, one clay tablet at a time. Picture scholars in ancient Mesopotamia squinting at the night sky from their ziggurat observatories, etching tiny wedge-shaped marks into wet clay to record the precise movements of planets and stars. These weren't just random notes, they were part of an elaborate system spanning centuries, with some tablets even predicting lunar eclipses decades in advance. What's truly staggering is how accurate they were. Calculations from over 2,000 years ago often match modern astronomical models within mere minutes. Their secret, a blend of relentless observation and mathematical ingenuity. The Babylonians didn't just note celestial events, they categorized them, searching for patterns. They developed formulas to predict planetary positions, treating the heavens like a giant clockwork puzzle. One famous tablet, the Venus tablet of Amasajuka, tracks the planet's movements over 21 years with eerie precision. And here's the kicker: they did it all without knowing why the planets moved as they did. Their focus wasn't on grand theories, but on measurable, repeatable patterns, a cornerstone of science today. But their brilliance didn't stop at the stars. These ancient astronomers also invented the 60-based numeral system we still use for time and angles, proving their methods weren't just practical but downright revolutionary. Imagine trying to divide an hour without the number 60. Their influence lingers in every tick of your clock. What's even more humbling, many of these tablets were nearly lost to history, buried for millennia until archaeologists uncovered them in the 19th century. leaving modern scientists stunned by their sophistication. So the next time you check the time or glance at the night sky, remember, you're seeing it through the eyes of Babylonians who turned the unknown into a science. While the Babylonians were charting the heavens, another civilization was making equally groundbreaking discoveries, but this time beneath the skin. Imagine walking into an ancient Egyptian healer's workspace around 3,500 years ago. Instead of crude guesswork, you'd find shelves of meticulously organized papyrus scrolls, filled with precise instructions for diagnosing diseases, mixing herbal remedies, and even performing surgeries. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest surviving medical texts ever found, reads like a modern doctor's manual, except it was written over a millennium before Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine, was even born. This 34-foot-long scroll isn't just a list of random potions. It's a systematic catalogue of over 700 remedies, organized by ailment, with detailed instructions on everything from setting broken bones to treating heart conditions. The Egyptians didn't just throw herbs at problems and hope for the best. They documented which treatments worked, how to prepare them, and even noted side effects. One passage describes recognizing a patient's heart disease by feeling their pulse and listening for a humming in the ears, a startlingly accurate observation centuries before the circulatory system was understood. But what's truly revolutionary is their approach to hygiene. While medieval Europe would later dismiss cleanliness as unimportant, Egyptian physicians insisted on washing wounds with antiseptic agents like honey and salt, and they sterilized surgical tools with fire. They even used moldy bread as an early antibiotic, long before penicillin was discovered. This wasn't magic, it was methodical trial and error, recorded and refined over generations. Perhaps most astonishing is their understanding of the mind-body connection. The Ebers Papyrus includes treatments for depression and anxiety, recommending music therapy and aromatic oils. They mapped blood vessels and nerves, realizing the brain-controlled movement, a concept Europe wouldn't embrace for another 3,000 years. Every prescription, every diagnosis was rooted in observation and repeatable results. So when we marvel at modern medicine's advances, we're really standing on the shoulders of Egyptian healers who turned the human body into one of history's first scientific laboratories. Now let's travel east to ancient China, where an inventor named Zhang Heng unveiled a device so ahead of its time, it wouldn't look out of place in a modern seismology lab, except it was crafted in the year 132. Imagine a giant bronze urn adorned with ornate dragon heads, each clutching a metal ball. At first glance, it might seem like a ceremonial artifact, but hidden inside was a masterpiece of engineering, the world's first seismoscope. This wasn't just decorative, it could detect earthquakes happening hundreds of miles away, long before the ground began to shake beneath the feet of those nearby. Here's how it worked. A delicate pendulum hung inside the urn, balanced to remain still under normal conditions. But when seismic waves from a distant earthquake rippled through the ground, the pendulum would sway, triggering one of the dragon heads to release its ball into the mouth of a waiting bronze toad below. The direction of the fallen ball pointed toward the quake's epicenter. The sheer precision of this mechanism was astounding. Historical records describe it detecting tremors so faint, local observers hadn't even noticed them. And in one famous account, the seismoscope signaled an earthquake west of the capital. Days later, messengers arrived confirming a quake had struck a mountainous region over 400 miles away. What makes Zhang Heng's invention truly revolutionary wasn't just its functionality, but its philosophy. Unlike mystical explanations for natural disasters common at the time, His device relied on observable, physical reactions, a pendulum's movement caused by unseen waves. This was empirical science in action, centuries before the term even existed. Modern reconstructions of his seismoscope have proven its design shockingly effective, with some versions nearly matching the sensitivity of early 20th century seismographs. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about this ancient tool is what it represents, a shift from fear to understanding. By creating a device that measured the immeasurable, Zhang Heng didn't just predict earthquakes, he demystified them, proving even nature's most violent forces could be studied, tracked, and perhaps one day anticipated. That's a legacy far more enduring than bronze. While the Chinese were measuring earthquakes and the Egyptians were mapping the human body, over in ancient Greece, thinkers were tackling an even bigger question: what is everything made of? Enter Empedocles, a philosopher who dared to simplify the chaos of nature into just 4 building blocks: earth, air, fire, and water. At first glance, this might seem like child's play compared to today's periodic table. But here's what most people miss: this wasn't just a whimsical guess. It was the first major attempt to create a universal system for classifying all natural phenomena, a foundational step toward modern chemistry. Picture a world where lightning was seen as the wrath of gods and diseases as supernatural curses. Against that backdrop, Empedocles' theory was radical. He argued that every substance, every transformation from a burning log to a rushing river, could be explained by combinations of these 4 elements interacting through forces he called love and strife. Fire made things hot and bright, earth gave them solidity, air brought lightness, and water enabled fluidity. Even human temperaments got categorized this way. Melancholic people had too much earth, while fiery tempers literally had excess fire. But the real genius wasn't in the elements themselves, it was the method behind them. Empedocles didn't just philosophize, he experimented. He famously demonstrated air's materiality by submerging a hollow sphere in water, proving it wasn't empty space but something tangible. This shift from myth to method was revolutionary. For the first time, nature wasn't a collection of random acts, but a puzzle that could be decoded through observation and logic. Centuries later, we know his elements were incomplete, yet the impulse to categorize and simplify, to find patterns in complexity, still drives science today. The periodic table, it's essentially a refined version of Empedocles' vision. Even modern concepts like states of matter, solid, liquid, gas, plasma, eerily echo his 4 elements. What started as an ancient Greek thought experiment became a framework so enduring, it shaped how humanity investigates the material world. So the next time you light a match or feel the wind on your face, remember, you're interacting with ideas that sparked over 2,000 years ago, proving even wrong theories can light the way to truth. While Greek philosophers pondered the elements and Chinese inventors measured earthquakes halfway across the world, the Maya were perfecting a system so mathematically sophisticated it still baffles modern astronomers: their celestial calendar. Picture a civilization without telescopes, without even a written number system as we know it, tracking the movements of Venus with such precision their calculations were off by just 2 hours every 500 years. That's like setting your watch in the year 1500 and having it still keep near-perfect time today. At the heart of their system were 3 interlocking calendars, each serving a distinct purpose. The Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred calendar, guided rituals and agriculture. The Hob, a 365-day solar calendar aligned with seasons. But the real masterpiece was the long count, a linear timeline stretching back millions of days, allowing them to calculate dates thousands of years into the past or future. To achieve this, Mayan mathematicians developed the concept of zero independently, centuries before it appeared in Europe, and used a base 20 numbering system that could handle enormous calculations. Their obsession with celestial cycles wasn't just academic. Carvings at Capon reveal how they tracked Venus's 584-day cycle to predict wars and coronations, believing its appearances influenced earthly events. Eclipse tables in the Dresden Codex show they could forecast lunar eclipses with 90% accuracy, knowledge that likely cemented their priests' authority. But perhaps most impressively, their calendar corrected for the solar year's slight imperfection. While Europe's Julian calendar drifted by days each century, the Maya knew the true year lasted about 365.242 days, a figure modern science pegs at 365.2422. That's a difference of just 17 seconds per year. What's truly humbling is how they achieved this. For generations, anonymous scribes perched atop pyramid observatories like El Caracol at Chichen Itza, charting the stars' paths with nothing but knotted cords and aligned sightline. Their legacy, a system so precise when their calendar ended in 2012, the world held its breath, proving that even today, we still measure time through the Maya's unblinking gaze at the cosmos. While the Maya tracked celestial cycles and the Chinese built earthquake detectors, the Romans were solving a problem far more down to earth, literally. Imagine a bustling city of over 1 million people, all needing clean water daily, with no electric pumps or pressure systems to deliver it. That's the challenge Rome faced, and their solution, the aqueduct, wasn't just infrastructure. It was a masterclass in applied physics, built with such precision that some of these structures still function today, 2,000 years later. At first glance, aqueducts might seem like simple stone channels. But the brilliance lay in their gradients-engineered slopes so exact, they allowed water to flow dozens of miles without stagnating or rushing too violently. The average Roman aqueduct dropped just 1 foot in elevation for every 300 feet of distance, a gradient of roughly 0.3%. To achieve this over uneven terrain, Roman engineers used a tool called a chorobates, a massive wooden level filled with water to measure minute elevation changes. One miscalculation, and entire sections could run dry or burst from pressure. Yet they nailed it, adjusting for curves, tunnels, and even siphons that defied gravity by pushing water uphill using sealed pipes, a concept Galileo would later call the marvel of Roman engineering. But here's what's even more impressive, their understanding of fluid dynamics. Without formal equations or modern physics, they observed that water moved fastest in smooth, narrow channels and slower in wider ones. They lined aqueducts with waterproof cement to reduce friction, added sedimentation tanks to filter debris, and designed vents to release air bubbles that could disrupt flow. These weren't just hunches, they were repeatable solutions honed through trial and error, documented in manuals like Vitruvius's De Architectura, perhaps the ultimate testament to their skill. The Aqua Virgo, completed in 19 BC, still supplies water to Rome's Trevi fountain today. That's not just durability, it's proof that when it came to harnessing nature's forces, the Romans didn't just build. They engineered with a precision that turned water into a living lesson in science. While Rome engineered waterways and Greece debated the elements, ancient India was perfecting a medical system so comprehensive it treated not just the body, but the very essence of life itself. Ayurveda, meaning the science of life, wasn't merely a collection of herbal remedies. It was a meticulously documented framework for health, with texts like the Charaka Samhita detailing everything from surgical procedures to the psychological roots of disease, all compiled centuries before Hippocrates walked the earth. What set Ayurveda apart was its foundational principle, balance, physicians recognized three vital energies: vata, air; pitta, fire; and kapha, earth, water, that governed bodily functions. Illness wasn't random misfortune, but a detectable imbalance in these forces. To diagnose, practitioners didn't just examine symptoms. They checked pulse rhythms, studied tongue coatings, even analyzed urine's color and odor. One startlingly advanced technique involved tasting a patient's sweat to identify metabolic disorders, a practice modern studies suggest could actually reveal diabetes through abnormal sweetness. But the real innovation lay in its preventative approach. Ayurvedic texts prescribed specific diets, sleep cycles, and seasonal routines tailored to individual constitutions. A pitta-dominant person prone to inflammation might be advised to avoid spicy foods during summer, while a vata type would receive warming therapies in winter. This personalized medicine wasn't guesswork. It emerged from generations of documented case studies, with physicians meticulously recording which interventions succeeded or failed. Surgery, too, reached remarkable heights. The Sushruta Samhita describes over 120 surgical instruments and 300 procedures, from cataract removal to cesarean sections. They used sterilized blades, practiced skin grafts, and even understood the dangers of sepsis, knowledge Europe wouldn't rediscover until the 19th century. Most astonishing, their understanding of anatomy came not from dissection, banned in many cultures, but from observing wounds on battlefields and studying bodies decomposed in rivers. Perhaps Ayurveda's greatest legacy, though, was recognizing the mind-body connection centuries before modern medicine. Treatments for depression included meditation and aromatic oils, while digestive issues were linked to stress, insights now confirmed by gut-brain axis research. This wasn't mysticism, it was science born from observing patterns across thousands of lives. When an Ayurvedic practitioner today diagnoses a condition, they're echoing a 3,000-year-old tradition of seeing health not as isolated symptoms, but as a symphony of interconnected systems, a vision startlingly ahead of its time. In the scorching deserts of ancient Persia, where summer temperatures could melt stone, architects faced a seemingly impossible challenge: how to cool buildings without electricity or modern machinery. Their solution, the Wind-Catcher, a towering structure that harnessed the desert's own breath to transform sweltering interiors into oases of cool air. These weren't just decorative features, they were meticulously engineered systems, blending observation of wind patterns with an intuitive grasp of thermodynamics centuries before the science had a name. Picture a slender tower rising high above a clay brick home, its open face angled precisely to catch even the faintest breeze. As wind rushed down the shaft, it funneled through underground channels called kanats, passing over cool water from hidden aquifers or simply the earth itself, which stayed chilled even in blistering heat. By the time the air emerged into living spaces, it had dropped by as much as 20 degrees, a natural air conditioning system powered entirely by physics. The genius lay in the details. Some wind catchers had adjustable vents to control airflow, while others used internal baffles to direct breezes where needed most. In Yazd, a city where temperatures routinely hit 120 degrees, entire neighborhoods stayed livable thanks to these silent, energy-free giants. But the real marvel wasn't just their functionality, it was their adaptability. Coastal versions captured humid sea breezes, filtering salt through damp cloths to make air breathable. In regions with shifting wind directions, builders crafted multi-directional towers with openings on all sides, and when nights grew cold, the system reversed. Warm indoor air rose through the tower, drawing in cooler night air below. This wasn't guesswork, it was the result of generations observing how air moved, how materials absorbed heat, and how water changed temperatures, a living textbook of environmental science etched into clay and stone. Modern engineers still study these structures, marveling at their efficiency. Some contemporary buildings in the Middle East now incorporate updated wind catchers, proving that the best solutions sometimes come not from reinventing the wheel, but from rediscovering it. What began as a desert survival tactic became a lesson in sustainable design, one that whispers across millennia, reminding us that innovation often starts by working with nature, not against it. For tens of thousands of years, long before modern conservationists coined terms like controlled burns or fire ecology, Indigenous Australians were reshaping entire landscapes with nothing more than carefully placed flames. Picture walking through the Australian bush 60,000 years ago. What you'd see isn't wilderness left to chance, but a living tapestry meticulously cultivated through a practice now called firestick farming. Armed with smoldering torches made from bark, Aboriginal communities would light small, low-intensity fires during cool seasons, creating a patchwork of recently burned and recovering areas. Far from destruction, these deliberate burns were acts of renewal, demonstrating an ecological wisdom so advanced it's only now being fully appreciated by Western science. The brilliance of this system lay in its precision. Unlike catastrophic wildfires that rage uncontrolled, these cultural burns moved slowly along the ground, clearing dry underbrush while sparing mature trees. The results were astonishing. Fresh green shoots would emerge within days, attracting kangaroos and other game to these nutrient-rich zones. Firestick farming didn't just make hunting easier, it created a mosaic of habitats at different stages of regrowth, supporting more plant and animal species than untouched forest could sustain. Some native plants, like the majestic grass tree, actually depend on periodic fires to crack their seed pods and trigger flowering. Aboriginal elders knew this instinctively, passing down burning schedules tied to seasonal cycles and plant lifespans over hundreds of generations. What modern ecologists have recently discovered is how profoundly this ancient practice shaped Australia's ecology. Studies comparing areas with continuous indigenous burning to those without show staggering differences. Fire-managed lands host up to twice as many mammal species. The burns prevented fuel buildup that leads to devastating megafires, while the ash fertilized soil and recycled nutrients. Even rainfall patterns may have been influenced, as the lighter smoke from cool burns allowed more moisture to condense into clouds. This wasn't just land management, it was a form of terraforming, a slow dance between humans and environment that sustained biodiversity for millennia. Perhaps the most humbling realization is how this knowledge was preserved. Without written records, Aboriginal Australians encoded fire protocols into songlines, oral maps woven through music and story that detailed when, where, and how to burn across vast territories. When European settlers banned these practices in the 19th century, the consequences were catastrophic: uncontrollable wildfires, habitat collapse, and the disappearance of species that had thrived under indigenous stewardship. Now, as climate change intensifies bushfires, scientists are urgently relearning these ancient techniques, partnering with Aboriginal elders to reinstate controlled burns. The lesson is clear: sometimes the most advanced solutions aren't new technologies, but rediscovered wisdom from those who knew the land best. High in the Andes, where jagged peaks slice through clouds and valleys plunge thousands of feet, the Inca Empire accomplished what should have been impossible. They built a highway system spanning over 25,000 miles, connecting mountains, deserts, and jungles into a single, cohesive network. Imagine constructing roads without iron tools, wheeled carts, or even written language to draft blueprints. Yet the Incas didn't just carve paths through this brutal terrain. They engineered masterpieces of durability and precision, with some sections still intact 5 centuries later. What made their system revolutionary wasn't just its scale, but its adaptability. Inca roads weren't one size fits all. They were tailor-made for each environment. In steep slopes, they built staircases with steps precisely measured to match a porter's stride. Across deserts, they laid wide, gravel-paved causeways that resisted shifting sands. Through swamps, they elevated roads on stone causeways to stay dry. Their secret, a rigorous process of material testing. Engineers would construct small test segments, observe how they weathered storms and traffic, then adjust designs before full-scale construction. Some roads incorporated drainage channels so effective they still redirect rainwater today. The real marvels, though, were their bridges. In canyons too deep for stone arches, they crafted suspension bridges from woven grasses, some spanning over 150 feet. These weren't flimsy rope walkways. Teams of specialists would braid iku grass into cables as thick as a man's torso, capable of supporting marching armies and llama caravans. Every year, communities would gather to renew the bridges in a ritual blending engineering and tradition, replacing frayed cords while elders shared maintenance techniques passed down generations. The Spanish conquistadors, accustomed to European stone bridges, wrote in awe of these swaying marvels, with one chronicler noting they seemed to dance with the wind, yet held firm as mountains. But perhaps the most overlooked innovation was their surveying method. Without compasses or theodolites, Inca engineers used simple but ingenious tools, a series of wooden poles and sighting lines to map elevations, and clay models to visualize routes before construction began. Messengers running the roads carried quipus-knotted strings recording distances, supplies, and terrain notes, creating an early data network for infrastructure upkeep. This wasn't just trailblazing, it was civil engineering on a continental scale, planned with a precision that put many contemporary European roads to shame. The true testament to their skill, modern engineers still study sections like the road to Machu Picchu, where stones fit so tightly a knife blade can't slip between them, and gradients so consistent they reduce fatigue on long climbs. These roads weren't merely functional, they were feats of empathy, designed to ease travel for barefoot messengers and burdened porters alike. In a world that often equates technology with complexity, the Inca roads whisper a different truth. Sometimes, the most advanced solutions are those that work in harmony with both land and people. While empires rose and fell around them, the Sumerians were busy perfecting something far more universal: the art of brewing beer. But this wasn't just about celebration or relaxation. It was one of humanity's first forays into controlled biochemistry, a process so finely tuned that their recipes could rival modern craft breweries. Picture a bustling marketplace in ancient Mesopotamia, where clay tablets weren't just recording laws or trade deals. They were detailing exact ratios of barley, dates, and water, with specific instructions for fermentation times and temperatures. The hymn to Ninkasi, written around 1800 BC, isn't just a tribute to the goddess of beer. It's a step-by-step technical manual, preserving brewing knowledge like a sacred science. What set Sumerian beer apart was its consistency. Archaeologists have found evidence of large-scale breweries with standardized ceramic vessels, each designed to maintain ideal conditions for fermentation. They'd malt barley by soaking it in water until it sprouted, then halt germination with heat, a process that converts starches into fermentable sugars, a biochemical principle they understood through observation long before anyone knew what enzymes were. Some recipes even called for a bapir, a twice-baked barley bread that acted like an ancient yeast starter, ensuring predictable fermentation batch after batch. But the real innovation was in their quality control. Sumerian beer came in at least 8 varieties, from dark and strong to light and sweet, each with strict production standards. Temple inspectors would sample brews using long straws inserted into communal jars, checking for off flavors or improper fermentation, an early form of food safety regulation. They even pasteurized their beer without realizing it, storing it in sun-baked clay jars that reached temperatures high enough to kill harmful bacteria. Perhaps most astonishing is how intertwined beer was with daily life. Workers along the Tigris and Euphrates were often paid in beer rations, with wages calculated based on strength and type. Medical texts prescribed specific brews for ailments, recognizing their antibiotic properties millennia before science explained why. This wasn't just a drink, it was currency, medicine, and sacrament, all born from a process that transformed simple grains into something transformative. When we raise a glass today, we're participating in a tradition that began with Sumerian brewers who turned caves into laboratories and fermentation into humanity's oldest biotechnology. While European explorers clung to coastlines, terrified of sailing into the unknown, Polynesian voyagers were crisscrossing the vast Pacific Ocean, a space larger than all Earth's landmasses combined with nothing but the stars, waves, and whispers of wind to guide them. Picture this, a double-hulled canoe, its sails woven from pandanus leaves, gliding across thousands of miles of open water. No compasses, no maps, just generations of knowledge encoded in chants and stick charts, allowing navigators to pinpoint remote islands with pinpoint accuracy. This wasn't luck, it was science carved into memory long before telescopes or satellites existed. The genius of Polynesian wayfinding lay in its multi-sensory approach. Navigators or wayfinders didn't rely on a single clue but wove together layers of environmental data. At night, they memorized the rising and setting positions of over 250 stars, using them as celestial highways. The star Arcturus, for example, passed directly over Hawaii, a fact preserved in oral traditions for centuries. By day, they read ocean swells like fingerprints, detecting subtle shifts caused by distant islands refracting waves. They observed cloud formations that clustered over land and tracked the flight paths of birds, knowing certain species would return to shore at dusk. Even the taste of seawater could hint at proximity to a lagoon's freshwater springs. But the true breakthrough was their ETAC system, a mental map that treated the canoe as stationary while islands moved beneath star paths. Imagine visualizing your destination not as a fixed point, but as a dynamic relationship between stars, currents, and time. This abstract thinking allowed them to account for drift and currents without instruments. When clouds obscured the sky, they navigated by T-Lapa underwater lightning like streaks caused by waves refracting off islands, visible only to trained eyes. Modern science has since confirmed their accuracy. In 1976, the Hokulea canoe sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti, using only traditional methods, arriving within miles of its target after 34 days at sea. Satellite data later proved Polynesians could detect islands up to 120 miles away by swell patterns alone. What we once dismissed as primitive intuition was, in fact, an empirical system honed over millennia, a living testament to human ingenuity. Today, as we rely on GPS satellites orbiting Earth, Polynesian navigation reminds us that the greatest technology sometimes isn't hardware, but the relentless curiosity to decode nature's hidden language. Buried beneath the Mediterranean waves for 2,000 years, a corroded bronze artifact no bigger than a shoebox lay waiting to rewrite history. When divers recovered the Antikythera Mechanism from a shipwreck off Greece in 1901, they initially thought it was just another ancient statue. But beneath its calcified surface hid a labyrinth of precisely interlocking gears, an analog computer so advanced it wouldn't be matched for another millennium. This wasn't some ornamental trinket. It was a celestial calculator capable of predicting solar eclipses, tracking Olympic cycles, and modeling the erratic motions of planets with jaw-dropping accuracy. The mechanism's inner workings reveal a sophistication that defies its age. Using 37 meshed bronze gears, some with teeth cut to exact triangular profiles, it mimicked the mathematics of the cosmos. Turn its hand crank, and dials would display the moon's phase in real time, accounting for its elliptical orbit. Another gear simulated the Saros cycle, an 18-year pattern of eclipses, while inscriptions served as an astronomical user manual. X-ray scans in the 21st century exposed even more brilliance. Differential gears, a component once thought invented in the 16th century, allowed it to calculate subtleties like the moon's varying speed. What's truly staggering isn't just its complexity, but its purpose. Unlike later devices used for navigation or astrology, the Antikythera Mechanism appears designed purely to demonstrate cosmic harmony, a mechanical universe in miniature. Its creator, possibly linked to Hipparchus or Archimedes, didn't just observe nature. They replicated its rhythms in bronze, proving the heavens obeyed predictable rules. This shift from myth to mechanism was revolutionary. While Babylonians recorded celestial patterns and Egyptians built aligned temples, the Greeks took the audacious step of creating a physical model that could simulate those patterns indefinitely. Modern reconstructions have confirmed its precision. When researchers built a replica using 2,000-year-old techniques, its eclipse predictions aligned with historical records to within a few hours. Yet the most haunting question remains: how much knowledge died with its creators? Cicero wrote of a similar device made by Archimedes, and clues suggest such mechanisms weren't unique. Had this technology not been lost, might the scientific revolution have come 1,000 years earlier? The Antikythera Mechanism stands as both a triumph and a warning, proof of how brilliance can flicker brightly before being swallowed by time's tides, only to re-emerge when the world is ready to understand it anew. Along the fertile banks of the Nile, where annual floods erased boundaries and reshaped the land, Egyptian surveyors faced a recurring problem: how to fairly redistribute fields after each inundation. Their solution, a system of measurement so precise it could divide plots with ropes and pegs, ensuring every farmer received land proportional to their harvest taxes. This wasn't abstract mathematics. It was geometry born from necessity, where a misplaced knot could mean the difference between feast and famine. The Egyptians called it rope stretching, and with this simple toolkit, they laid the groundwork for mathematical principles we still use today. What made their approach revolutionary was its blend of practicality and precision. Surveyors, known as harpedonapti, would stretch ropes tied at measured intervals to form perfect right angles, a technique later formalized as the 3-4-5 triangle method. By creating a triangle with sides in this ratio, they guaranteed a 90-degree corner without needing protractors or complex calculations. Tax records from the Rind Papyrus reveal how these measurements translated to real-world applications, with scribes calculating areas of irregular fields by breaking them into simpler triangles and rectangles. One particularly clever formula approximated a circle's area by subtracting 1/9 from its diameter and squaring the result, an early glimpse of what we now recognize as pi. But the true test of their geometric prowess wasn't in fields, it was in the pyramids. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built around 2500 BC, demonstrates accuracy that would challenge modern engineers. Its base forms a near-perfect square with sides averaging just 2.3 centimeters apart in length, and its corners align almost exactly with the cardinal directions, deviating by less than 1/15 of 1 degree. How did they achieve this without compasses or theodolites? Archaeologists suspect they used the circumpolar stars, tracking their movements to establish true north, then applying the same rope techniques to maintain perfect angles during construction. The legacy of Egyptian geometry extends far beyond monuments and farmland. When Greek mathematicians like Thales and Pythagoras visited Egypt, they didn't just admire its wonders, they absorbed its methods, transforming practical ropes stretching into theoretical proofs. The Rhind Papyrus, with its collection of 84 problems, reads like an ancient textbook, showing step-by-step solutions for everything from calculating pyramid slopes to distributing bread rations. What began as a tool for restoring flood-washed boundaries became humanity's first systematic approach to spatial reasoning, proving that sometimes the most profound scientific leaps begin with nothing more than a knotted rope and a problem to solve. Imagine a time when the concept of nerves and circulation was completely unknown, yet healers could pinpoint precise spots on the body that, when stimulated, could relieve pain, ease digestion, or even restore energy. This was the reality in ancient China, where acupuncture emerged not as a mystical practice, but as a meticulously documented system of healing, one based on centuries of observing how the body responds to touch, pressure, and the careful insertion of thin metal needles. The foundation of acupuncture lies in the concept of meridians, pathways believed to carry life energy, or Qi, throughout the body. Early practitioners mapped these channels by carefully noting how pain in one area often correlated with relief when another distant point was pressed. Over time, they identified over 365 acupuncture points, each corresponding to specific organs or functions. What's remarkable is how these observations align with modern anatomy. Many acupuncture points coincide with nerve bundles, muscle trigger points, or areas where connective tissue is dense, suggesting ancient healers were detecting physiological relationships long before science could explain them. But acupuncture wasn't just about sticking needles randomly. Texts like the Huangdi Nijing, compiled around 200 BC, describe precise needle depths, angles, and even the sensation patients should feel, a dull ache or warmth known as deki, to ensure effectiveness. Practitioners used bronze models for training, with holes marking exact points, and tailored treatments to individual pulses and symptoms. One striking example is their use of acupuncture for pain relief during surgeries, documented as early as the Han Dynasty. Without anesthesia, they relied on needle placement to block pain signals, a principle modern science now links to the release of endorphins and gate control theory, where nerve signals are overridden by other stimuli. Perhaps the most compelling evidence of acupuncture's empirical roots comes from its global rediscovery. When European explorers first encountered the practice, they dismissed it as superstition. Yet by the 20th century, studies began confirming its effects, like its ability to reduce nausea in chemotherapy patients or alleviate chronic back pain when combined with conventional medicine. MRI scans now show acupuncture altering brain activity in pain processing regions, while microcurrent studies reveal changes in electrical conductivity at precise points. What began as an ancient healing art, refined through generations of trial and observation, now stands as a bridge between traditional wisdom and modern science, proving that sometimes the body's secrets are uncovered not through high-tech tools, but through patience, precision, and the careful study of how we respond to the gentlest of touches. In the bustling intellectual hubs of 8th century Baghdad, where scholars translated ancient texts and debated the mysteries of nature, a Persian polymath named Jabir ibn Hayyan was quietly revolutionizing how humans interact with matter itself. While Europe languished in the so-called Dark Ages, Jabir and his fellow Islamic alchemists weren't just mixing potions. They were pioneering systematic experimentation, laying the groundwork for what would become modern chemistry. His workshop brimmed with alembics and retorts, glassware he himself refined to perfection, designed not for mystical transformations but for meticulous observation. What set Jabir apart was his relentless focus on repeatable processes. Unlike earlier alchemists who shrouded their work in symbolism, he documented exact procedures for distilling liquids, crystallizing salts, and even purifying metals. His writings describe how to produce acetic acid by fermenting vinegar and how to isolate arsenic and sulfur through precise heating techniques, methods still recognizable to chemists today. One of his most enduring contributions was the alembic still, a double-chambered device that allowed for the efficient separation of substances through distillation. This wasn't just theoretical, it had immediate practical applications, from producing rosewater for perfumes to refining medicinal tinctures. But the real breakthrough was his approach to categorization. Jabir proposed that all metals were composed of two fundamental qualities: mercury, representing volatility, and sulfur, representing combustibility, a precursor to later elemental theories. He classified substances by their reactions, noting how acids could dissolve certain materials while alkalis neutralized them. His experiments with nitric and hydrochloric acids led to the discovery of aqua regia, the only mixture capable of dissolving gold, a feat that would fascinate alchemists for centuries. Perhaps most remarkably, Jabir insisted on quantification. In an era when many relied on qualitative observations, he measured weights before and after reactions, noting lost or gained mass, an early nod to the conservation of matter. His works, later translated into Latin, became foundational texts for European chemists like Robert Boyle and Antoine Lavoisier. What began as an Islamic Golden Age innovation quietly shaped the very tools and principles that would unlock the periodic table. In Jabir's tireless experiments, we see not magic but the birth of empirical chemistry, one carefully measured distillation at a time. Deep in the forests of North America, where modern hikers might see only untamed wilderness, indigenous tribes perceived a vast natural pharmacy, every plant, bark, and root meticulously categorized by its healing properties through centuries of careful observation. Unlike modern laboratories with controlled experiments, Native American healers relied on an unbroken chain of knowledge, passing down discoveries through generations until they'd assembled what amounted to the continent's first comprehensive medical database. Take the willow tree, its bitter bark chewed for pain relief long before chemists isolated salicin, the compound that would later inspire aspirin, or echinacea, used by the Plains tribes to ward off infections, now a staple in cold remedies worldwide. This wasn't guesswork, it was rigorous trial and error, with healers noting which plants reduced fevers, which eased childbirth, and which, when prepared incorrectly, caused harm. The sophistication of these botanical libraries becomes clear when examining how knowledge was gathered and tested. Tribes like the Cherokee maintained designated medicine keepers who apprenticed for decades, memorizing hundreds of plants and their effects. They understood dosage. Intuitively boiling dogwood bark for 20 minutes produced a heart-safe fever reducer, while oversteeping it led to dangerous toxicity. Some tribes even developed early allergy tests, applying small amounts of new plants to the inner elbow and observing reactions before internal use. The Mohegans perfected poultices from jewelweed to treat poison ivy, a remedy so effective modern studies confirm it blocks the rash-causing urushiol oil. What set indigenous ethnobotany apart was its holistic framework. Plants weren't just chemicals to exploit but relatives with spirits, harvested with rituals ensuring sustainability. Before gathering sweetgrass, Blackfoot healers would leave offerings and take only every third strand, guaranteeing regrowth. This reverence for balance led to astonishingly accurate insights. The Iroquois treated diabetes with a tea from blueberry stems, now known to contain glucoquinine, a compound that lowers blood sugar. Even their delivery systems were innovative. The Chippewa wrapped medicines in birch bark, which contains betulinic acid, a natural preservative keeping remedies potent for months. European settlers initially dismissed these practices as superstition, yet by the 19th century, up to 90% of frontier households relied on Native American herbal knowledge when doctors were scarce. Today, over 40% of modern pharmaceuticals trace their origins to these indigenous discoveries, from quinine derived from Andean cinchona bark to the cancer-fighting paclitaxel, first isolated from the Pacific yew tree used by coastal tribes. The true testament to this ancient science, many tribal pharmacopoeias are now being re-evaluated by ethnobotanists, who find that plants labeled weeds in colonial herbals appear in indigenous texts with pages of precise applications. It's a humbling reminder that long before microscopes or clinical trials, America's first scientists were decoding nature's remedies through patience, observation, and an unshakable belief that the land itself held the keys to healing. On the sun-drenched island of Kos around 400 BC, a revolutionary idea took root, that diseases weren't punishments from angry gods, but natural phenomena with observable causes and cures. This was the radical vision of Hippocrates, a physician whose name now graces the oath sworn by doctors worldwide, but whose true legacy lies in something far more transformative: the birth of evidence-based medicine. Picture a time when fever was seen as divine wrath and epilepsy called the sacred disease. Yet Hippocrates calmly insisted that every ailment, no matter how mysterious, could be understood by studying the patient's symptoms, their environment, and even the seasons. His approach was methodical to the core. Where other healers might interpret a cough as an evil spirit's touch, Hippocrates documented its duration, the color of phlegm expelled, and whether it worsened at night. He noted how certain diseases peaked in summer versus winter, how swampy areas bred bad air associated with malaria, and how diet influenced recovery. His famous treatise Airs, Waters, Places reads like an early public health manual, advising physicians to consider a town's wind patterns, water sources, and even the soil composition before treating its residents. This wasn't just observation, it was the first systematic attempt to correlate environmental factors with disease patterns, laying the groundwork for modern epidemiology. But Hippocrates' genius wasn't just in what he included, it was in what he excluded. He dismissed dream interpretation and animal sacrifices as diagnostic tools, instead advocating for physical examination. His descriptions of clubbed fingers in chronic lung disease or the facies hippocratica, the sunken, pallid appearance preceding death, remain clinically accurate today. He even pioneered patient confidentiality and ethical care, insisting healers must do no harm, a principle still central to medicine. What's often overlooked is how his method spread. The Hippocratic Corpus, a collection of over 60 texts attributed to his school, functioned as an ancient medical wiki, with physicians across the Mediterranean adding case studies and refining techniques. One scroll details reducing a dislocated shoulder using a method nearly identical to modern techniques, while another describes using a speculum to examine ears, a tool archaeologists have since found in Greek ruins. Perhaps most strikingly, Hippocrates embraced uncertainty. Where others claimed absolute cures, he wrote, "Life is short, the art long, opportunity fleeting, experience treacherous, judgment difficult." This humility, the acknowledgement that medicine evolves through trial and observation, makes his work timeless, Today, when doctors track fever curves or consider a patient's zip code as a health factor, they're unknowingly channeling a Greek healer who dared to see sickness not as magic, but as a puzzle waiting to be solved. Beneath the blazing sun of ancient Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers carved through arid plains, farmers faced a paradox, surrounded by water yet constantly battling droughts and floods. Their solution, the world's first large-scale irrigation systems, transforming unpredictable rivers into life-giving networks of canals, levees, and reservoirs. This wasn't just digging ditches, it was hydrological engineering on a grand scale, with techniques so advanced they're still studied by modern agricultural scientists. The Mesopotamians didn't just divert water, they mastered it. Using nothing more than bronze tools and human labor, they constructed canals with precisely calculated gradients, ensuring water flowed steadily without eroding the channels. They built levees to control flooding, diverting excess water into basins that could be tapped during dry spells. Some canals stretched over 50 miles, linking fields to rivers with an efficiency that turned barren land into the Fertile Crescent's legendary wheat and barley fields. Archaeologists have found evidence of adjustable gates made from reeds and bitumen, allowing farmers to fine-tune water flow to different crops, an ancient version of modern irrigation controls. What's truly remarkable is how systematically they refined their methods. Clay tablets from detailed crop rotation plans tied to soil salinity levels, a direct response to observing how constant irrigation could leave fields encrusted with salt. They'd plant salt-tolerant barley one year, then switch to more sensitive wheat after rainfall naturally leached the soil. Some texts even prescribe resting fields by flooding them intentionally, mimicking natural flood cycles to restore nutrients, a practice modern agronomists call fallowing. But the real genius lay in their collaborative approach. Maintaining these systems required entire city-states to coordinate, leading to some of history's first water laws. The Code of Hammurabi included penalties for farmers who hogged water or neglected canal maintenance, proving they understood that technology alone wasn't enough, it needed governance. When a drought struck or locusts swarmed, priests tracked these events on cuneiform tablets, creating early climate records that helped predict future famines. The legacy of Mesopotamian irrigation echoes in surprising ways today. Their use of feeder canals inspired Roman aqueducts, while their salinity solutions foreshadowed modern desert agriculture. Even the humble shaduf, a counterbalanced bucket for lifting water, spread from Mesopotamia to Egypt and beyond, remaining virtually unchanged for millennia. These weren't just farmers, they were the original civil engineers, proving that with enough observation and ingenuity, even a desert could be made to bloom. Amid the churning waves of the North Atlantic, where fog and storm clouds could obscure the sun for days, Viking navigators faced a seemingly impossible challenge: how to stay on course when their only guide, the sun, vanished from sight. Their ingenious solution, a seemingly ordinary crystal that harnessed the hidden physics of light. These weren't just decorative stones, they were precision tools known as sunstones, chunks of calcite or cordierite that could reveal the sun's position even when the sky was a featureless gray. The secret lay in a property called birefringence, the way certain crystals split light into two separate beams. By rotating a sunstone until the split beams matched in brightness, a navigator could pinpoint the sun's location with startling accuracy. Picture a Viking skipper holding a translucent crystal to the overcast sky, tilting it slowly until the faint polarization pattern emerged, revealing an invisible reference point. This wasn't guesswork, it was applied optics centuries before scientists formally understood polarization. Modern experiments have confirmed their effectiveness. Researchers using replicas of Viking sunstones on cloudy days found they could determine the sun's position within 5 degrees close enough to maintain a course from Norway to Greenland without modern instruments. Some scholars even speculate these crystals might explain why Vikings could navigate safely during the short days of winter when the sun hovered barely above the horizon. But the real marvel isn't just the tool itself, it's how seamlessly it fit into their broader navigational toolkit. Vikings combined sunstones with other empirical methods, like tracking wave patterns and bird behavior. They noticed how certain seabirds flew toward land at dusk, or how ocean swells bent around distant islands, creating subtle ripples. Together, these techniques formed a robust system, one that didn't rely on any single cue but wove together multiple strands of observation. What makes the sunstone story even more compelling is its rediscovery. For centuries, mentions in Norse sagas were dismissed as legend until archaeologists found a calcite crystal aboard a 16th century shipwreck, likely a surviving relic of Viking-era practices. Today, pilots and sailors studying alternative navigation methods still experiment with polarized light, proving that sometimes the most advanced solutions aren't the newest, but the ones refined through generations of necessity and keen observation. The Vikings didn't just conquer the North Atlantic, they mastered its hidden light, turning a simple crystal into a compass that defied the clouds. While Europe was still in its Bronze Age, civilizations across sub-Saharan Africa were already mastering one of humanity's most transformative technologies, iron smelting. Far from simple trial and error, African metallurgists developed sophisticated methods to extract metal from rock, achieving temperatures over 1,200 degrees Celsius in clay furnaces without modern thermometers or bellows. In the forests of modern-day Tanzania, the Haya people engineered furnaces so efficient they could smelt iron at temperatures rivaling 19th century European blast furnaces over 3,000 years before the Industrial Revolution. The secret to their success lay in precision airflow control. Haya smelters built tall, cylindrical furnaces with carefully placed tires clay pipes that funneled air into the burning charcoal. But here's the ingenious part. They didn't just pump air randomly. By angling these pipes in specific configurations and using natural draft instead of bellows, they created a cross-flow system that superheated the furnace core while conserving fuel. Archaeologists recreating these furnaces were stunned to find they reached temperatures high enough to produce high-carbon steel, a material Europeans wouldn't mass produce until the Middle Ages. West African kingdoms like the Nok culture took metallurgy even further. Their smelters added an extra layer of innovation by preheating the air entering the furnace, a technique called preheating the blast that wasn't adopted in Europe until the 1700s. This wasn't accidental. Ironworkers deliberately mixed specific types of ore with flux materials like limestone to remove impurities, creating alloys tailored for different tools and weapons. Some Igbo Akwu artifacts from 9th century Nigeria reveal intricate bronze castings made using the lost wax method, proving African metalworkers were experimenting with multiple metals simultaneously. Perhaps most striking is how deeply scientific the process was. Smelting teams included specialists who monitored furnace color and flame patterns to gauge temperature, while others adjusted airflow based on the sound of the burning charcoal, a practice modern engineers recognize as early combustion analysis. In Mali, the Dogon people even developed a symbolic classification system for different furnace types, assigning each design spiritual meanings that mirrored their technical functions. What outsiders once dismissed as ritual was actually a way to encode complex metallurgical knowledge across generations. The legacy of these innovations echoes today. When colonial Europeans encountered African iron tools in the 18th century, they assumed they'd been traded from elsewhere until archaeologists uncovered thousands of furnace sites proving local production. From the spearheads that defended Great Zimbabwe to the agricultural tools that fed the Mali Empire, these weren't just metal objects. They were the products of centuries of systematic experimentation, where every batch of ore refined was another step toward unlocking nature's hidden structures, long before laboratories or textbooks existed to explain why it worked. Imagine a man so consumed by curiosity that he leapt from his bath and ran naked through the streets shouting, "Eureka!" Not because he'd lost his mind, but because he'd just unlocked one of nature's fundamental secrets. This was Archimedes of Syracuse, a thinker whose hands-on experiments with levers and water would lay the groundwork for entire branches of physics centuries before Newton or Galileo. His famous boast, "Give me a place to stand, and I shall move the earth," wasn't mere bravado. It was a testament to his discovery that even the heaviest objects could be lifted with minimal force, if only you understood the precise pivot point. The genius of Archimedes' lever principle lies in its deceptive simplicity. By methodically testing different weights and pivot positions, he realized that the effectiveness of a lever depended on two factors: the length of the beam and the placement of the fulcrum. A long enough beam with the fulcrum positioned closer to the heavy object could multiply force exponentially, a concept we now call mechanical advantage. Legend claims he demonstrated this by single-handedly launching a fully loaded ship using a complex pulley system, astounding onlookers who saw him achieve what should have required dozens of laborers. Modern engineers still apply this principle everywhere, from construction cranes to wheelbarrows, proving that sometimes the most profound truths hide in plain sight. But Archimedes didn't stop with levers. His bath-time revelation about buoyancy, the famous Eureka moment, revealed another universal law. An object submerged in fluid displaces its own volume, and the upward force equals the weight of that displaced fluid. To test this, he allegedly filled a tub to the brim, placed a gold crown inside, and measured the overflow to determine if the metal had been diluted with silver, an early form of density testing that doubled as fraud detection. His writings on floating bodies describe parabolic shapes of stable equilibrium, concepts naval architects still use when designing ship hulls. What's often overlooked is how rigorously Archimedes documented his methods. Unlike philosophers who relied solely on thought experiments, he built actual models, scaled down cranes, water screws, and siege engines to verify his theories through repetition. When he calculated pi by inscribing and circumscribing polygons around a circle, he didn't settle for rough estimates but pushed his calculations to a 96-sided figure, arriving at a value between 3.1408 and 3.1429, a precision unmatched for over 1,000 years. The true measure of his legacy appears in the unlikeliest places. Those massive stones in Egypt's pyramids, they may well have been positioned using his lever principles. Modern submersibles adjusting their buoyancy, they're applying Archimedes' exact same fluid calculations. Even the humble wrench in your toolbox operates on his discoveries about rotational force. In a world that often separates thinkers from tinkerers, Archimedes proved the most revolutionary ideas emerge when abstract math meets hands-on experimentation, when someone dares to not just ponder the universe's rules, but test them one dripping bath and balanced lever at a time. For centuries, the secret of black powder smoldered in the workshops of Chinese alchemists, not as a weapon, but as an unexpected byproduct of their quest for immortality. While mixing saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal in the 9th century, these experimenters noticed something startling. Certain proportions produced flashes of fire and billowing smoke. This accidental discovery could have remained a curious novelty, but what followed was anything but random. Through meticulous trial and error, Tang Dynasty chemists transformed this volatile mixture into something predictable and controllable, one of history's first engineered chemical reactions. The real breakthrough came when they shifted from observation to measurement. Early formulas like those recorded in the Wujing Zongyi, our military manual, revealed precise ratios: 75% saltpeter, 15% charcoal, 10% sulfur, a balance optimized through generations of testing. They documented how grinding the components separately before mixing reduced explosions, while adding water to form paste like cake powder made it safer to transport. By the Song Dynasty, workshops operated like primitive laboratories, with craftsmen adjusting grain sizes and packing densities to create powders for different purposes: coarse grains for slow-burning fuses, fine powder for sudden bursts of flame. But gunpowder's true innovation lay in its applications beyond fireworks. Military engineers designed hollow bamboo tubes packed with powder to launch arrows, then evolved them into metal-barreled cannons by the 13th century, centuries before similar weapons appeared in Europe. Naval commanders used timed explosive charges to breach enemy ships, while miners adapted the technology for tunneling through rock. Each adaptation required new formulations. Some mixtures produced more smoke for signaling, others burned hotter for metal casting. This wasn't just tinkering. It was systematic materials science, with practitioners recording which batches succeeded or failed under specific conditions. Perhaps most impressive was their quality control. Archaeologists have found Song Dynasty gunpowder mills with separate mixing rooms, storage caves with earthen floors to prevent static sparks, and even proof yards where batches were test-fired before use. Recipes included purity standards for saltpeter, tested by burning a sample to see if it left residue, and instructions for aging charcoal to optimize combustion. When Marco Polo described Chinese fire lances in the 13th century, he was witnessing the culmination of 400 years of chemical refinement. The legacy of this work extends far beyond warfare. Modern propulsion systems, from fireworks displays to rocket engines, still rely on the same basic principles those alchemists uncovered: controlled burn rates, confined ignition, and the transformative power of chemistry. What began as a failed immortality experiment became humanity's first controlled harnessing of explosive energy, proving that even accidents can spark revolutions when met with rigorous observation and relentless curiosity. In the heart of the Aztec Empire, where the Valley of Mexico's lakes shimmered under the sun, farmers faced a paradox: fertile land surrounded by water yet too swampy for traditional crops. Their ingenious solution, the Chinampa, a floating garden so meticulously engineered that it could yield up to 7 harvests per year, turning shallow lake beds into some of the most productive farmland in the ancient world. These weren't just rafts of dirt, they were masterpieces of soil science and hydrology, built layer by layer with the precision of modern agronomists. The process began with woven reed frames anchored to the lakebed, creating rectangular plots roughly 30 meters long and 2.5 meters wide. But the real magic lay in what came next. Farmers dredged nutrient-rich muck from the lake bottom, piling it onto the frames along with alternating layers of decaying vegetation and sediment. This sandwich of organic matter and mineral soil created a self-fertilizing system. The decomposing plants released nitrogen and other nutrients just as roots reached down to absorb them. Willow trees planted along the edges served dual purposes. Their roots stabilized the Chinampa sides, while their leaves provided mulch to retain moisture during dry spells. Water management was equally sophisticated. The The narrow plots were separated by canals, acting as natural irrigation ditches that kept roots perpetually hydrated without waterlogging. These waterways also regulated temperature, protecting crops from frost by releasing stored heat at night, an early form of microclimate control. Fish thriving in the canals provided both protein and natural pest control, snapping up insects that might harm crops. Archaeologists have even found evidence that farmers adjusted planting schedules based on Chinampa location, with plots nearer the shore reserved for thirsty crops like maize, while those farther out grew aromatic flowers for trade. What's truly staggering is the scale of this system. At its peak, the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan was surrounded by over 12,000 hectares of Chinampas, producing enough food to feed an estimated 200,000 people, all without plows, beasts of burden, or synthetic fertilizers. Spanish conquistadors wrote in awe of markets overflowing with tomatoes, chilies, and squash grown on these floating plots, noting their vibrant colors and exceptional size. Modern experiments replicating Chinampa techniques have confirmed their efficiency, with some studies showing yields up to 40% higher than conventional drill and farming in the same region. The legacy of the Chinampa isn't just in its productivity, but in its sustainability. Unlike modern agriculture, which often depletes soil, these gardens grew richer with each harvest cycle. Today, as farmers worldwide grapple with water scarcity and soil degradation, researchers are revisiting Aztec methods, discovering that sometimes the most advanced solutions aren't found in high-tech labs, but in the quiet wisdom of those who learn to farm with nature, not against it. The Chinampa stands as a testament to what happens when keen observation meets innovation, a floating revolution that turned swamps into breadbaskets, one carefully layered garden at a time. In the sun-baked courtyards of ancient Alexandria, where scholars pored over scrolls and debated the shape of the world, a librarian named Eratosthenes performed a feat that should have been impossible. He measured the entire planet with nothing but a stick, a well, and the power of geometry. Picture this, it's around 240 BCE, and most people still believe Earth is flat or so vast its curvature can't possibly be calculated. Yet Eratosthenes, hearing that sunlight shone directly down a well in Scienc at noon on the summer solstice, casting no shadow, realized he could use this simple observation to unlock the planet's dimensions. His method was elegant in its precision. On the same day in Alexandria, 500 miles north, he measured the angle of a shadow cast by a vertical stick. The shadow formed a 7.2-degree angle, which he recognized as a fraction of a full circle's 360 degrees. Using basic geometry, he reasoned that if 7.2 degrees equaled 500 miles, then 360 degrees must equal the full circumference. His calculation, approximately 25,000 miles, a figure astonishingly close to today's accepted value of 24,901 miles. What's often overlooked is the sheer audacity of his assumptions. Eratosthenes had to presume Earth was spherical, a radical idea at the time, and that sunlight reached the planet as parallel rays. He also needed accurate distance measurements between cities, likely relying on bematists, professional walkers who counted paces along trade routes. Yet his margin of error was less than 2%, a level of accuracy unmatched for over 1,000 years. The brilliance of his experiment wasn't just in its result, but in its reproducibility. Unlike mythological explanations for natural phenomena, Eratosthenes' method invited verification. Anyone with a stick and a keen eye could test his findings, a hallmark of true scientific inquiry. Modern geodesists still celebrate his work as the birth of Earth measurement, proving that even the grandest truths can be uncovered with humble tools and relentless curiosity. Perhaps the most poignant detail, Eratosthenes' original writings are lost to time. We know of his feat only through later scholars who preserved his legacy. In a way, his experiment mirrors the very earth he measured, its full impact only visible when viewed from the distance of centuries, a reminder that genius often outlasts the hands that first charted its course. Beneath the golden sands of Egypt, where the scorching sun could wither flesh in days, priests and embalmers perfected an art so precise it defied nature itself: mummification. This wasn't merely wrapping bodies in linen. It was a 70-day scientific ritual blending chemistry, anatomy, and microbiology, a process so effective that millennia later, modern researchers can still study the tissues of those preserved remains. Picture a workshop near the Nile where embalmers worked with the precision of surgeons, their tools laid out like a medical kit: bronze hooks, obsidian blades, and jars of natron salt, each step honed through centuries of trial and observation. The process began with a startlingly modern grasp of antiseptics. Embalmers would rinse the body with palm wine, its natural alcohol content killing surface bacteria, then make a precise incision in the left flank to remove internal organs. But here's where their genius shone. They knew which organs to extract: liver, lungs, stomach, intestines, and which to leave: the heart, believed to hold the soul. The brain, considered unimportant, was liquefied and drained through the nose using a hooked tool, a technique so efficient it left the skull cavity intact. Each organ was then treated separately, packed in natron, a salt mixture that dried tissues without shriveling them, and stored in canopic jars lined with resins to inhibit mold. Natron was the true star of the process. This naturally occurring blend of sodium carbonate and bicarbonate wasn't just sprinkled over the body. It was applied in measured layers, with embalmers adjusting the mixture's grain size for different body parts. Fine grains for delicate areas like fingers, coarser salts for muscular limbs, all left to dry for exactly 40 days, a duration modern experiments confirm is optimal for dehydration without excessive brittleness. They even stuffed the body with linen pads soaked in spices like myrrh and cinnamon, not just for fragrance but for their antimicrobial properties, creating a sterile environment that slowed decay. The final steps revealed an almost eerie understanding of material science. Resins, heated to specific temperatures, were brushed onto the skin as a waterproof sealant, while linen bandages were coated in sticky gum to form an oxygen barrier, effectively vacuum sealing the body. Some mummies show evidence of beeswax injected under the skin to restore lifelike plumpness, a primitive form of embalming filler. When Howard Carter unwrapped Tutankhamun's mummy in the 1920s, he found the boy king's skin still supple in places, a testament to the method's precision. What's often overlooked is how systematic their knowledge became. Medical papyri like the Louvre papyrus detail which resins worked best for different climates, while temple walls depict embalmers checking body moisture levels by pressing a finger to the skin, an early version of quality control. Modern microbiologists analyzing mummy wrappings have identified compounds like terebinth resin, which contains terpenes capable of killing flesh-eating bacteria. Even their mistakes were instructive. When 19th century archaeologists found mummies with poorly applied resins, the bodies were far more deteriorated, proving the Egyptians had empirically identified what worked through generations of careful documentation. The legacy of mummification extends far beyond tombs and treasures. Modern forensic scientists study Egyptian techniques to improve tissue preservation, while disaster response teams have adapted their resin sealing methods for corpse identification in humid environments. In a way, those ancient embalmers were the first biochemists, turning death into a laboratory for understanding life's fragility and proving that science, even when dressed in ritual, could cheat time itself. Imagine a world without zero, no way to distinguish between 10 and 100, no concept of nothingness as a number, no foundation for the digital age's ones and zeros. This was reality for most ancient civilizations until Indian mathematicians in the 5th century CE performed an intellectual leap so profound, it reshaped human thought forever. The invention of zero wasn't just adding a symbol to a number line, it was the birth of abstract mathematics, a shift from counting physical objects to manipulating ideas that had no tangible form. The brilliance of the Indian zero lay in its dual nature. Earlier cultures like the Babylonians and Mayans had used placeholder symbols. Think of a tally mark indicating an empty column, but these were more like punctuation than true numbers. Indian scholars, particularly the mathematician Brahmagupta, went further. In his 7th century text Brahmasputa Siddhanta, he didn't just define zero as a placeholder, he treated it as a full-fledged numeral with its own properties. He spelled out rules we still use today. Any number multiplied by zero equals zero, while subtracting zero leaves a number unchanged. For the first time, nothingness wasn't just an absence, it was a tool that could interact with other numbers, opening doors to negative numbers, algebra, and eventually calculus. What's often overlooked is how radical this idea was. Greek philosophers like Aristotle had argued that zero couldn't exist because nature abhors a vacuum, while Roman numerals lacked any symbol for zero, making complex calculations agonizingly cumbersome. Indian mathematicians, however, saw the power of emptiness. The concept of sunya, Sanskrit for void, borrowed from Buddhist and Jain philosophies about the nature of absence, transformed into a mathematical framework. By the 9th century, zero had spread to the Islamic world, where scholars like Al-Khwarizmi incorporated it into the numeral system we now call Arabic. The practical impact was staggering. Merchants could now calculate profits and debts with precision. Astronomers modeled planetary motions more accurately, and architects designed structures with exact proportions. A 12th century inscription at the Chattabhaj Temple in Gwalior shows the oldest confirmed use of zero as a numeral, a small circle carved into stone, looking eerily like the symbol we use today. Without this innovation, modern computing would be impossible. Every algorithm, every line of code relies on binaries dance between 0 and 1. Yet the true testament to zero's power lies in its universality. Unlike other discoveries tied to specific cultures or technologies, zero transcends boundaries. It's as vital to a Silicon Valley programmer as it was to a 9th century Persian astronomer or a Renaissance Italian banker. In a single stroke of abstract genius, Indian thinkers gave humanity the language to describe nothing, and in doing so, unlocked the ability to calculate everything. While modern concrete crumbles after decades, Roman structures like the Pantheon still stand strong after 2,000 years, not because they were built better, but because they were built different. The secret lies in a volcanic ingredient so potent, scientists only recently decoded its molecular magic. Picture Roman engineers trekking to the fiery slopes of Mount Vesuvius, collecting ash from eruptions that had terrified their ancestors, and mixing it with lime and seawater to create a material that would outlast empires. This wasn't just mortar, it was an ancient nanotechnology, a recipe so advanced we're still unraveling its secrets today. The key breakthrough came from a mineral called pozzolana volcanic ash rich in silica and alumina. When mixed with lime and water, it triggered a chemical reaction forming calcium aluminum silicate hydrate, a glue-like substance that reinforced the concrete at the microscopic level. But here's the twist. Roman concrete didn't just resist erosion, it actively repaired itself. modern analysis of harbor walls near Naples revealed how seawater percolating through cracks reacted with the ash to form new mineral growths, sealing fractures over time. Imagine pouring a sidewalk that patches its own potholes. That's what Roman builders achieved without even knowing chemistry's basic rules. What's truly astonishing is how systematic their experimentation was. Vitruvius, Rome's foremost engineer, documented exact ratios into architecture, 1 part lime to 2 parts pozzolana for above-ground structures, but a saltwater mix for marine constructions. Archaeologists have found variations in recipes across the empire. Ash from German volcanoes produced weaker concrete, while Greek islands added crushed pottery for extra strength. This wasn't guesswork, it was rigorous materials testing on a continental scale. The Pantheon's dome epitomizes their mastery. Its concrete transitions from heavy basalt aggregate at the base to lightweight pumice at the top, reducing weight without sacrificing integrity. Modern engineers using scans discovered its thickness varies precisely to distribute stress, and the oculus, that iconic open hole, acts like a keystone, preventing cracks from spreading. No steel reinforcement, no synthetic additives, just volcanic ash and meticulous observation of how materials behave under pressure. Today, scientists are reverse engineering Roman concrete to develop self-healing infrastructure, while marine biologists study ancient harbor blocks now teeming with coral, proof that the least toxic building material might be one we forgot. The lesson isn't just in the recipe, but in the mindset. The Romans didn't seek immortality through pyramids or gold, but through a humble mix of fire-born ash and water that whispered a truth we're only now hearing sometimes: the future is buried in the past. In the hushed halls of Alexandria's great library, where scrolls from across the known world whispered secrets of the cosmos, Claudius Ptolemy embarked on an audacious project to map every visible star in the night sky with a precision never before attempted. His Almagest, completed around 150 CE, wasn't just a list of celestial objects. It was a revolutionary atlas that transformed stargazing from mystical interpretation into rigorous science. Armed with little more than a dioptra, a simple sighting tool, and centuries of Babylonian and Greek observations, Ptolemy catalogued over 1,022 stars, assigning each precise coordinates of brightness and position. What set his work apart was its systematic methodology. Earlier astronomers like Hipparchus had recorded stellar positions, but Ptolemy organized them into 48 constellations, introducing a grid-like coordinate system of longitude and latitude for the celestial sphere. He didn't just note where stars were, he ranked them by magnitude, creating the first brightness scale still used by astronomers today. His coordinates, though slightly off due to the era's limited instruments, were accurate enough to predict planetary movements for centuries, a feat akin to drawing a subway map without ever seeing the tunnels beneath. The real innovation, though, lay in his error correction. Ptolemy cross-referenced his observations with Babylonian records spanning 700 years, identifying discrepancies in planetary motions. To reconcile these, he devised the concept of epicycles, smaller circular orbits within larger ones, a flawed but ingenious attempt to explain retrograde motion without telescopes. Modern astronomers now know planets move in ellipses, yet Ptolemy's mathematical models were so robust they remained the standard until Kepler's laws in the 17th century. But the Almagest's legacy extends beyond astronomy. Its structured approach, hypothesis, observation, mathematical modeling became a blueprint for the scientific method itself. Arab scholars preserved and refined his work during Europe's Middle Ages, while Renaissance navigators like Columbus used his star tables, updated for their time, to cross uncharted oceans. Today, when you gaze at a planetarium's projected sky or use an app to locate Polaris, You're seeing the universe through Ptolemy's eyes, a reminder that even imperfect tools, wielded with patience and system, can chart the heavens. Centuries before sailors relied on GPS or even the North Star to guide them, Chinese scholars were puzzling over a curious phenomenon, a spoon-shaped lodestone that always pointed south when placed on a polished bronze plate. This wasn't just a party trick, it was humanity's first encounter with Earth's magnetic field, a discovery that would evolve from mystical ritual to world-changing technology. As early as the Han Dynasty around 200 BCE, these south-pointing spoons were used in elaborate divination ceremonies where fortune tellers interpreted their alignments as messages from the cosmos. The lodestone's uncanny behavior seemed magical, but what began as spiritual symbolism would soon transform into something far more revolutionary: the magnetic compass. The leap from divination tool to navigational aid didn't happen overnight. By the Tang dynasty in the 8th century, craftsmen had refined the design, replacing the spoon with a magnetized needle balanced on a bamboo float or suspended from silk thread. These early compasses, often housed in ornate wooden cases, were still steeped in symbolism. The needle's alignment with the cardinal directions was thought to reflect the balance of yin and yang. But something pivotal shifted when Song dynasty navigators realized this tool could solve a very practical problem: staying on course during overcast nights when stars were invisible. Suddenly, the compass wasn't just interpreting fate, it was charting it. What made the Chinese compass truly groundbreaking was its adaptability. Maritime records from the 12th century describe sailors using floating fish compasses, magnetized iron fish that pivoted on water-filled bowls, their tails forever indicating north. By the time of Zheng's epic 15th century voyages, compasses had been integrated with detailed nautical charts, allowing fleets to traverse the Indian Ocean with unprecedented precision. This synthesis of tool and technique reveals a deeper truth. Innovation often blooms when empirical need meets serendipitous discovery. The same force that guided diviners seeking cosmic harmony now steered ships through monsoons, proving that the line between mysticism and science is often drawn by the hand of necessity. Modern reconstructions of these early compasses reveal their surprising accuracy. When placed on a vibration-free surface away from metal interference, a well-balanced Song dynasty needle can align within 5 degrees of true north, a margin small enough to navigate from China to East Africa. The compass's journey from temple artifact to ship's bridge mirrors humanity's own shift from seeing nature as a realm of spirits to a system of measurable forces. Today, as hikers peer at digital compasses on smartphones, they're tapping into a chain of curiosity that began with a lodestone spoon trembling on bronze, whispering secrets of the Earth's hidden magnetism to those patient enough to listen. Beneath the glittering expanse of the southern hemisphere's night sky, a canvas unknown to early European astronomers, Indigenous Australians were mapping constellations not as static pictures, but as dynamic stories that governed survival. For over 65,000 years, long before Stonehenge or the pyramids, Aboriginal cultures wove celestial patterns into the very fabric of daily life, creating intricate seasonal calendars tied to the movements of stars, planets, and even dark nebulae. Unlike Western astronomy's focus on fixed star charts, these traditions treated the heavens as a living library, where the rising of the Pleiades at dawn signaled the arrival of winter moths, a crucial protein source, or when the orientation of the emu in the sky constellation's dark dust lanes indicated the season to harvest eggs. The precision of these systems reveals a profound scientific mindset. In the central desert, the Wardaman people tracked the heliacal rising of the star Arcturus to mark the onset of monsoon rains, while Yolngu communities in Arnhem Land used the celestial shark anchor, Badum part of the Big Dipper, to time turtle hunting expeditions with lunar cycles. But the real innovation lay in their three-dimensional perspective. Where Greek astronomers plotted stars on flat plains, Aboriginal skywatchers integrated altitude and azimuth, noting how a star's position relative to the horizon at different times of year could predict weather shifts. Rock art at Antikythera, dated to over 40,000 years old, depicts lunar cycles with markings that correspond to the moon's phases, a record of systematic observation millennia before Babylonian astronomers began similar tracking. What's often overlooked is how these celestial narratives encoded complex data. The Borong people of Victoria saw the variable star Antares, known as Jewett, as a signal for the arrival of termites when it faded in brightness. An observation modern science confirms aligns with the star's annual dimming during termite season. Similarly, the Kamilaroi people linked the appearance of the celestial stingray, Jinnan Western constellation crux, to the flowering of specific plants used for medicine. This wasn't just mythology, it was an empirical system where celestial events served as ecological triggers, demonstrating an understanding of astrophysics and phenology long before those terms existed. The survival stakes of this knowledge cannot be overstated. In the fire-prone landscapes of northern Australia, the appearance of the Scorpius constellation in the early evening told communities when to perform controlled burns, timing it so new growth would emerge before the dry season's peak. Spanish explorers in the 17th century, lost in Australia's interior, marveled at indigenous guides who could navigate hundreds of miles without compasses, using only star paths sung into memory through songlines. Modern astronomers collaborating with Aboriginal elders have been stunned to learn these traditions include references to variable stars like Betelgeuse and even the Magellanic Cloud's proper motion, observations that would require generations of meticulous record-keeping. Perhaps the most poignant testament to this science is its resilience. Despite colonization's disruptions, Aboriginal astronomical knowledge persists, with elders like the late Bill Yidam Jumahani sharing Wardaman star lore that classifies planets as moving stars and describes gravitational lensing effects in terms of ancestor spirits bending light. When NASA satellite data recently confirmed ancient Aboriginal accounts of a massive meteor impact in the Gulf of Carpentaria, it underscored a vital truth. Scientific insight isn't confined to laboratories or textbooks. Sometimes it's written in the stars by those who have spent millennia learning to listen. The story of early scientific discovery isn't one of isolated genius, but of a vast, interconnected web threads of knowledge stretching across deserts, oceans, and mountain ranges, woven together by traders, travelers, and sometimes even conquerors. Picture a caravan of merchants trudging along the Silk Road, their bundles of spices and silks hiding something far more precious, scrolls detailing Babylonian star charts or Chinese alchemical recipes. Or imagine Andean engineers sharing not Quipu record-keeping with coastal fishermen, who then carried these ideas up the Pacific to Mesoamerica. This wasn't just accidental cultural exchange. It was the world's first collaborative research network, centuries before the internet or academic journals. Take something as universal as mathematics. The decimal system we use today didn't spring fully formed from one culture. Indian scholars perfected the concept of zero, Arab mathematicians refined algebraic notation, and Italian merchants popularized its use in trade, each civilization building on what came before. Even the humble compass, born from Chinese divination tools, found its way to Europe via Islamic traders, where it revolutionized Mediterranean navigation. The result, a Venetian sailor could chart a course using a Chinese-inspired needle, guided by Arabic star maps, to reach markets filled with Indian numerals. But this exchange wasn't always peaceful. The Mongol conquests, while devastating, created history's greatest accidental knowledge pipeline. As Genghis Khan's empire stretched from Korea to Hungary, it became a highway for ideas. Persian astronomers shared observatory designs with Chinese scholars, while European physicians learned surgical techniques from Islamic texts looted from Baghdad's libraries. The irony is profound. The same horsemen who burned cities also inadvertently preserved humanity's collective genius by stitching together fragmented discoveries. The most compelling evidence of this global dialogue lies in the echoes between distant innovations. The stepped pyramids of Mesoamerica and Egypt, separated by millennia and oceans, both encoded precise astronomical alignments. Ayurvedic herbal remedies from India bear striking resemblances to indigenous Amazonian plant medicine, suggesting shared experimentation with local flora. Even the Antikythera Mechanism's gears find parallels in medieval Persian astrolabes, as if inventors across time and space were whispering the same mechanical truths to one another. What emerges isn't a timeline of lone geniuses, but a chorus of curiosity farmers, healers, and stargazers who looked at the same moon and asked the same questions, then shared their answers across continents. When we marvel at Greek geometry or Chinese seismology, we're not just celebrating individual cultures, we're honoring humanity's oldest collaborative project, the relentless, borderless pursuit of understanding the world. What's truly astonishing isn't just how many ancient discoveries still hold up today, it's how often modern science catches up to them centuries later. Take Ayurveda, India's 3,000-year-old medical system. When Western researchers first examined its herbal remedies, they dismissed them as folklore. Yet today, peer-reviewed studies confirm turmeric's anti-inflammatory properties, ashwagandha has stress-reducing effects, and the gut-healing power of triphala, all staples of Ayurvedic pharmacy long before microscopes revealed why they work. Even the system's emphasis on individualized treatment now echoes in modern precision medicine's genetic profiling. This isn't coincidence. It's the result of generations recording which interventions succeeded across countless patients, building an empirical database through sheer persistence. Acupuncture tells a similar story. For decades, Western medicine labeled it a placebo until advanced imaging revealed needles actually trigger measurable changes in brain activity and neurotransmitter release. Modern studies show acupuncture can stimulate collagen production for wound healing, regulate digestive motility, and even alter gene expression in immune cells. The ancient Chinese mapped over 365 points on the body, each corresponding to specific functions. Now, researchers using infrared imaging and microcurrent scans find these points often coincide with nerve clusters or connective tissue planes where mechanical stimulation has outsized effects. What began as an observation that pressing certain spots relieved distant symptoms has evolved into a science of neurovascular signaling we're only beginning to decode. Then there are the technologies so advanced they had to be reinvented. The Antikythera Mechanism's gear-driven astronomical predictions wouldn't reappear in Europe until 14th century clock towers. Roman concrete's self-healing properties are now being reverse-engineered for sustainable infrastructure, with MIT scientists embedding bacterial spores in modern cement to mimic its ancient resilience. Even the humble compass, born from Chinese divination spoons, remains essential in everything from smartphone navigation to MRI machines, proof that some tools transcend their eras entirely. But perhaps the most poignant legacy lies in the methods themselves. Modern clinical trials follow the same basic principles as Hippocrates' case observations, just with double-blind controls instead of scrolls. Astronomers still track celestial cycles like the Maya, albeit with satellites rather than stone observatories, and ethnobotanists racing to document indigenous plant knowledge before it's lost are essentially continuing the work of those first healers who tasted leaves and noted their effects. The real thread connecting ancient and modern science isn't just specific discoveries. It's the shared conviction that nature operates by discernible rules, and that patient observation can reveal them, whether you're counting knots on a quipu or pixels on a telescope's CCD. The lesson here isn't that our ancestors knew everything, but that brilliance isn't bound to technology. A Babylonian astronomer tracking Venus with a clay tablet and naked eye was exercising the same scientific muscles as a JPL engineer programming a Mars rover, just with different tools. Progress isn't a straight line from primitive to advanced. It's a spiral where old insights often circle back with new relevance. Those early researchers may have lacked our instruments, but they mastered something equally vital: the art of asking the right questions and having the patience to let the world whisper its answers. From stargazing Babylonians to bridge-building Incas, these 31 groundbreaking methods shatter the myth that science began in ivory towers or modern laboratories. They reveal something far more profound: that curiosity and careful observation are woven into the very fabric of human civilization. Every culture, in its own way, developed systems to decode the mysteries around them, whether tracking Venus across clay tablets or engineering self-healing concrete. What unites them isn't just ingenuity, but a shared determination to transform wonder into understanding, one experiment, one calculation, one carefully recorded observation at a time. There's a quiet revolution hidden in these ancient breakthroughs. When the Maya calculated a solar year accurate to within 17 seconds, or when Persian alchemists measured chemical reactions centuries before the periodic table, they weren't just ahead of their time. They were proving that scientific thinking transcends eras and technologies. The real magic lies in how they achieved so much with so little. No telescopes, no microscopes, just relentless attention to detail. The Babylonian astronomers who mapped planetary motions with nothing but wet clay and patience, or the Polynesian navigators who crossed oceans by reading waves like poetry, they remind us that innovation isn't about having the best tools, but about seeing the world with fresh eyes. This isn't just history, it's a mirror. In an age of AI and quantum computing, we're still asking the same fundamental questions those early thinkers did. How does the universe work? How can we heal the body? What secrets hide in the spaces between stars? The answers evolve, but the spark remains unchanged, that insatiable drive to push beyond the known. When modern scientists study Roman concrete to develop eco-friendly buildings, or when doctors revisit Ayurvedic herbs for new cancer treatments, they're walking paths first carved by ancestors who dared to experiment, fail, and try again. So here's the real takeaway. Science isn't a Western invention or a modern luxury. It's a universal language spoken in every culture, from the Firestick farmers who shaped entire ecosystems to the Chinese inventors who captured earthquakes in bronze. These methods weren't just clever tricks, they were the first chapters in humanity's greatest story, one we're still writing today. Which of these ancient innovations left you awestruck? Was it the precision of Egyptian medical texts or the Inca's earthquake-resistant masonry? Drop your thoughts below, and if you've enjoyed this dive into the roots of discovery, hit subscribe. The past is full of surprises, and we're just getting